Starting in 2017, child abuse survivors began clamoring that statues of an historic serial pedophile found around the country were re-traumatizing victims of childhood abuse, and a movement began to cover or remove these pedophile statues. In recent weeks, pedophile apologists have taken to arguing for the preservation of statues honoring a likely pedophile known as Baron von Steuben. This video will dispel some of the distracting arguments put forth by the pedophile apologists. The video description contains links to all references cited here.
Red alert. Pedophile statue apologists have recently resorted to a distraction attempt of which we must be on high alert. It is important not to get distracted when pedophiles play the homophobia card. They have also done this with more recent scandals of celebrities like Kevin Spacey who were accused of child rape. This distraction attempt is age-old, and, as we will see, Baron von Steuben himself evaded pedophile scandals in the 1770s by getting help from powerful sympathetic elites to whom he complained he was a victim of mere homophobia. Today's childhood abuse victims have no problem with statues of homosexuals who are not child rapists. Child abusers ducking behind allegations of homophobia is a sleazy trick that re-traumatizes victims. Don't fall for it. For heaven's sake, it is irrelevant if a child abuser was gay or hetero.
To understand exactly why childhood abuse victims are opposed to statues of Baron von Steuben and why pedophile apologists protect the statues, a brief history of von Steuben is necessary. According to the website Gay Influence, Steuben traveled with a pack of African servants, and also with his 17-year-old secretary Pierre-Étienne de Ponceau. According to historian Friedrich Kapp's biography of Steuben, the Africans were quote-unquote given to Steuben upon arrival in America. He also traveled with, quote, a young lad from Germany, unquote, whose name was Karl Vogel.
Before joining the U.S. Continental Army, von Steuben fled his prior military service as captain for Frederick the Great due to rumors of pederasty, despite having been handpicked by the king for personal military instruction, according to an Encyclopedia of Racial and Ethnic Minorities in the Military by historian Alexander Belakowski. Not even Frederick the Great could intercede on his behalf. Friedrich Kapp, author of a biography of Steuben, says Steuben feigned illness as part of his resignation from Prussian service, after which he is said to have been a staunch Protestant enemy of Catholicism, and it was because the clergy of two nations wanted to try him for sodomizing children, as we will soon learn. According to the military periodical NCO Journal, the true reason Steuben sought a volunteer position in America using fraudulent credentials was because court-martial accusations of sexually fraternizing on duty kept him from a position in Europe despite a military hiring boom at the time. According to gay military historian Randy Schiltz, Steuben's biographer John Macaulay Palmer confirmed that the formal allegation of sodomizing, quote, young boys, unquote, was filed in a letter but fled from, and that it certainly ended Steuben's career in Europe despite what the letter itself described as royal tolerance of such practices by Frederick the Great and his court. The letter specified that Steuben was sought by the clergy for a trial on the same matter as well. LGBTQ Nation, a gay rights group, reports that the pedophile allegation was so widely known, it followed von Steuben from Prussia to France, where both Ben Franklin and the French clergy became alarmed. The same source says von Steuben, quote, unquote, adopted two male soldiers, one of whom later became a powerful U.S. senator, and a third, John Mulligan, considered himself one of von Steuben's, quote, sons, unquote. After being forced to move out from cohabitation with Vice President John Adams's son, after public concern over the closeness, von Steuben offered to take young Adams and Mulligan both into his home. Von Steuben's last will and testament refers to one of his adopted sons as sharing an emotional relationship he described in the will as, an extraordinarily intense, emotional relationship. President John Adams' biographer John Ferling says the President and First Lady were horrified at their son's infatuation with von Steuben, who Ferling says was widely considered gay at the time. According to the LGBTQ Nation website, von Steuben impersonated the rank of Lieutenant General and of Baron. He was neither. According to the National Park Service website entry on von Steuben and an article in American Heritage magazine called The Great Fraud.
The man's life was full of fraud, from birth to long after his death. The Bergen County Historical Society says the title of Baron was a completely fictional invention of von Steuben's father. The same source says that in 1904, the New Jersey state legislature approved a vast sum of money to restore a von Steuben house in which the man had never even lived, it having been built only well after his death. According to the Historical Society's then curator, more than 1 century earlier, von Steuben fled Europe to seek employment in the U.S. Revolution. The Continental Congress had ordered an end to hiring foreign mercenary officers, and were dissuading even volunteer officers. Nonetheless, the Congress was somehow persuaded in private meetings to offer him money. According to most historical accounts, including the National Park Service and the Bergen County Historical Society, both of which say General Washington saw resentment towards the outsider von Steuben among his officers. In Virginia, he was likewise unable to establish viable command when local militia leaders rejected his authority, and he began making plans to go back to Europe. In July 1783, several months before the war was even over, and only stayed because he could not get money to relocate, General Washington's final letter as a public servant was to von Steuben, looking forward to the time when he could embrace as Steuben's civilian, quote-unquote, obedient, affectionate servant, unquote, on the banks of the Potomac, when no longer in uniform. After the war, on November 6, 1788, von Steuben wrote to his adopted son and future Senator North to tell him he could pay back his debts, and that he would finally quit going to clubs and parties. Something's wrong with this picture.
In Washington, D.C., the statue of the fake Baron in Lafayette Square contains an armed, scantily clad older, larger, male soldier and a naked young male. This is deeply disturbing. These are not the classical nude forms acceptable for public display, such as cherubs, David, or bare-breasted Lady Justice. The von Steuben sculpture's nudity traumatizes childhood abuse victims because of its weaponized male-to-male domination in the context of an authority figure widely known for too easily being allowed to flee pedophile accusations by both church and state.
The statue simply must come down, and in the meanwhile, must be covered from the view of child abuse survivors and all children. Anyone defending the sculpture is worse than a generally sculpture apologist. Southern redneck slave owning was a horrible stain upon United States history, and the slavery inflicted upon children by pedophiles, especially among soldiers, is even worse. Don't fall for apologists who claim the allegations are unproved. When the suspect fled trials in 2 countries, these are the same attitudes that let Jerry Sandusky and his family rape children for decades without being stopped, even after complaints were lodged, and the same attitudes that saw rape suspects get shuffled around within U.S. charities and churches. The statue must be covered and then be taken down. Please pray for the children. Thank you for caring, and may God bless you.